Welcome everybody to this holy discussion that we have on in a weekly manner. And this is a gathering that we really enjoy discussing some of the Course in Miracle lessons. And this week we are in the middle of, or we are starting in the middle of a review 4 of A Course in Miracles, which will focus on lessons 141 through 147. So a warm welcome to our dear sisters and brothers. Does anyone have a prayer they could introduce? Otherwise, I have one that I can from a song of the prayer.
Go ahead, Manu.
Okay, so thank you, Johanna. I was going through the song of prayer, and this isn't an actual prayer which would use words necessarily, but it's a very succinct definition of true prayer, which I thought we could use and just spend a short moment in silence as we mull over these words. So the words are literally just one sentence, and here it goes. Lay down your dreams, you holy Son of God, and rising up as God created you, dispense with idols and remember Him. Lay down your dreams, rise up as God created you, dispense with idols and remember Him. As we dissolve into this beingness, in this collective brotherhood and sisterhood, we are just as God created us. And in this beingness, we are as Him, within Him, as He sustains us continuously as His eternal thought. Welcome back to our discussion. And what I'd like to do is share a little bit of our review text, which will allow us to jump in here into our discussion. So what we had in this review, which is actually in terms of its sequence, just got over the central theme. The central theme, my mind holds only what I think with God. That's how God created us. And in fact, in paragraph 3, I'll read through that and then open up the floor as we dive into some of our lessons. My mind holds only what I think with God. That is a fact and represents the truth of what you are and what your Father is. It is this thought by which the Father gave creation to the Son, establishing the Son as co-creator with Himself. It is this thought that fully guarantees salvation to the Son. For in His mind, no thoughts can dwell but those His Father shares. Lack of forgiveness blocks this thought from His awareness. Yet, it is forever true. My mind holds only what I think with God. What are your thoughts on that? Sharon, we cannot hear you.
That the mind is very different from the brain. And sometimes I get those two confused, or not confused, but mixed up. But yeah, if I pay attention and keep with God. I remember the minister of the Santa Rosa Church of Religious Science, he used to say, keep your eye on God. And that runs through my brain a lot. Just keep your eye on God.
Johanna, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sharon. Difference between the mind and the brain. That's a really good one. I was thinking, though, that the Course explains that our mind is split, right? We've got a wrong mind and a right mind. And so if my mind only holds the thoughts I think with God, so what does the wrong mind do? What does it do with all the stuff that goes on there? If it doesn't hold them, what does it do? It jumbles them, or and so I was just wondering what you guys would think about what do all the other stuff that's distracting, what does that, how's that in the mind, or in what way is that in the mind? Or maybe that's not an important question. Go ahead, Peter. Yeah, sorry.
I think this is another thing I wrestle with. I got to say, guys, this is a challenge, you know, because it seems like my mind holds all this other stuff that couldn't possibly be God's thoughts. I think he says somewhere in there, I don't remember exactly where it is, but he says, what you think are your thoughts are not your real thoughts. So there's some kind of distinction between what I think and what are real thoughts. And then the other thing is, in the introduction to the review, Manu, can you put that up again real quick? I think he says it's the unforgiveness that blocks the awareness of God's thoughts. And so lack of forgiveness blocks this thought from his awareness. So it has something to do with the fact that if I'm not thinking God's thoughts, I must still not be forgiving. And so noticing the link, I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
That's a very helpful, because I usually think of forgiving as letting go, right? So if the quote says it's lack of forgiveness, it's really clinging. It's clinging to the world that keeps me from understanding that my mind holds only what I think with God. No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. Juan, please go next.
I'm mute here. Yes. Let me get my hand off here. Okay. I have been thinking about this issue lately, about the mind, the thoughts. And actually, I placed a blurb on the Facebook page about this. I don't know how well it went, but it's the way I am processing this thought about the mind of God, the thoughts of God, is thinking in terms that not seeing a distinction between mind and thought. For some reason, that is helping me. Normally, we think of mind as a container and thoughts as though the things that are contained in the mind. I mean, that is fine as everything. It's a metaphor, of course. But it's a metaphor that has a basis in duality. Here, you know, we're differentiating between mind and thoughts. And just the idea of not making any distinction between mind and thought at this point, it's helping me. So that I don't know why. I cannot explain it any further than that. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that because I'm not going to be able to explain any further. But that's where my thoughts are.
Thank you, Juan. Actually, that's very helpful. So when I was reflecting on this, what came to mind was, it's funny, we keep using these words mind and thought, right? And they can have different meanings. So it says in the course, we are a thought in the mind of God. And somewhere else it says in the course, we are an eternal effect of God. And so I think mind and thought are the same exact thing. And it is also the same thing as God, the Father. It's also the same thing as the sonship. So the way I process it in this world of duality is the aspect of beingness. So in the beingness, which is fully hard to express, but it's like, you're fully alive, you are being, and you're not necessarily actively thinking the thoughts that are not what this lesson is all about. In that act of being, we are, it says, what you are and what your Father is. That's my interpretation. It is this thought by which Father gave creation to the Son. So obviously the course is using words that we are used to, but I think it's just talking about creation, which is God in a manner of speaking, and everything that he brought forth into reality, which is his sonship and daughtership. And that's also why it says it is this thought that fully guarantees salvation to the Son. Because if we truly grasp that oneness, that is atonement and salvation already. And we have to remember that this is just apparently happening. It's not happening in reality, what you and I are discussing right now. Yes, Peter, please go ahead while I unraise my hand.
I just want to throw one more idea into the mix. So we talk about mind, thought. I think it's in the beginning of the text, he says that consciousness is the domain of the ego. So does that mean God is not conscious? And is there a difference between consciousness and thought and mind and awareness, beingness, knowledge? I know words are symbols of symbols, but for me, it gets a little confusing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Let's continue to discuss that. Ruxandra?
For me, the difference between mind and thought, it's like the mind is the sky and the thoughts are the clouds, that they are arise and they fall, they pass. And when I claim an ownership and I stop that thought, that it's abstract thought, it is God thought, it's love thought, it's include everything. And when I take ownership and became mine, personal, and I limited that thought, and I block the flow of the creation because that thought is limited, and create my personhood because it became personal. In that moment, that thought is not anymore God's thought. And my mind holds only what I think with God. So I create my separate self. And my mind holds only what I think with God, because that part of mind separate, it doesn't really exist. So my mind is one with God mind. And I hold his thought, that are my thoughts, that we are all co-creator, part of creation. Only when I believe that I'm separate, I don't keep his thought. And those thoughts are thoughts that are those that I take the ownership of them and said, became concrete, became all happens to me. It's not happens because the creation happens. It is a me there who became the center of everything, and it's separate.
Thank you, Ruxandra. That's lovely.
Manu,
Yes, Ardit, why don't you jump in and then we'll have Juan and Sharon after you.
Either no, they could go ahead. I just since I can't wave my hand, so they can go ahead and then just remember me.
Yeah.
No, come on.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You please,
I don't want to hear
please.
you, Ardith.
Oh, okay. All right, all right. I had two things that just made this easier for me anyway. Is that I always have thought when I read the word God, it always comes up love, and that comes of course out of the Bible. But it's all over the place actually. That God really is love, which is what we are. And so when I read my mind holds only what I think with God, it's always I reread it only what I think that's loving. That the rest of it kind of washes away. And I think also another thing that would be helpful, and is to me, in the workbook, lessons 8 and 10 talk about the mind being actually blank when it's not thinking, in essence, when it's not thinking God thoughts. As a matter of fact, on I think I pulled up lesson 10, the 8 also, there has several, or at least a couple of references to it. And it says in this particular paragraph, it says, now we are, I don't want to read too much here, but I want to make sure it's enough context. Well, anyway, now we are emphasizing the presence of these quote-unquote thoughts means that you are not thinking. This is merely another way of repeating our earlier statement. Your mind is really a blank. And to recognize this is to recognize nothingness when you think you see it. As such, it is the prerequisite for vision. And the other two also kind of indicate that when we're not thinking, in essence, the thoughts with God, that's the mind's blank. So I look at it that way. If I've got some other stuff in there, there's really nothing going on. And as to where my imagined thoughts go, I haven't a clue. I suppose we could use the common parlance in the illusion of the subconscious mind, but I don't even go there. I'm getting simpler and simpler and simpler as time goes on. So anyway, that's my little contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ardit. Yep, equating God with love is very helpful indeed. Juan?
Me unmute and bring my hand down. Or these, I like that simpler and simpler thing. I'm trying to move there too. And but in response to Peter about his question about consciousness, is God conscious and consciousness? So if God is not conscious, what is he? The way I have dealt with that, and it, of course, the way I deal with things are in the mind and the rational. So it makes sense to me to think this way, that in the same way that we are using words that have a specific meaning in our parlance, everyday parlance, like, for example, forgiveness. And the course uses forgiveness, but not in the sense that we commonly use it. I apply that to knowledge. We can use knowledge at different levels. And we have the knowledge at the world level, which is basically the perception of the senses and things like that. But when we talk about knowledge in terms of God, this is knowledge that it's not dual. And the problem with consciousness is that it requires duality. And of course, the logic will tell you then that God cannot be conscious because he's one. But God has knowledge. So knowledge is the knowledge of everything and all inclusive. But that term means also love. So that here we're talking about knowledge and love, like if there were two different things. I do not believe that to be so in my experience and my understanding. So I don't believe that God is conscious. No, I believe that God is knowledge and is love, but not in the sense that we use those words in here in Earth. So that's my input.
Thank you. Thank you. Sharon, would you like to go next?
Yes. So I was wondering, do you think that when the Course says that consciousness is of the ego, is that talking about like if your put to sleep with anesthesia or simply asleep, when you wake up into this, it is said that you became conscious. Is he conscious? No, he's unconscious. Okay, he woke up, he's conscious. Is that the realm of the ego? Is that what the Course is talking about? That type of consciousness, which is of the body?
Sharon, thanks for the question.
Or
I think
Well,
Peter has a response for you.
Yeah, I think of consciousness in terms of subject and object. So there's something to be conscious of. And the problem for me in my limited egoic mind is the idea that there's no object, there's no subject. I don't know if it's subject or object in heaven, because there is only God. There is nothing but God. It's interesting in God Speaks, which was written by Meher Baba, I believe. He does talk about the fact that in the beginning, at least, God kind of goes in and out of awareness, and God does in a way sleep, in the sense that in the beginning there was nothing for God to be. I know I'm misstating this, but there was because there's only God, there was nothing for God to be conscious of or aware of other than itself, and God knows itself, and that's knowledge. And I think it's just very difficult for us in living in duality, what we think is dualistic thinking, to comprehend this absoluteness and this oneness, in the sense that there really is there is no object. There's nothing to be conscious of.
right,
There's only to know.
right,
I'm going to
exactly.
stop there because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Thank you.
Oh yeah, you do. That's the essence of oneness. There is no duality. You know, if you're conscious of something, that brings in duality. There's the you that is conscious, and then there's the object that you're conscious of. So I think you're right on.
Yeah, I think, Peter, you're right. In fact, in the Indian tradition, when they talk about Advaita, it's basically the right translation for that is not two, right? It's not two. And to have two, me and you, subject and object, from the way I think the Course talks about it, and some others do, consciousness is required. So it's almost like a framework that needs to exist for us, for there to be you and I, for there to be this and that. And like you explained, in the absolute sense, there is nothing else. There is not two. Therefore, God is.
Yeah. Hello, hand up.
Yes, Ardith, go for it.
I was just thinking that in essence, it really is being plus. That's what we do in this illusion. Being plus. And I think it's in the clarification of terms, but it may be elsewhere, that really there's, I know for all the pages that we study, it's only in the experience that God is known. So I don't know. Again, I go back to my simplicity. The more complex I get and trying to parse it out and get everything, all my ducks in a row, I can't do that. I think being is something that is close to awareness. That's the level above what the Course is taking us to. We're not there in the Course. It tells us that it's preliminary to that awareness. That's all. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, wonderful. I wasn't watching the flow of hands, but I think Juan, you might be next, and then Ruxandra.
Okay, I just want to throw this in the mix just to make the soup more interesting. If God is not conscious, that then we cannot say that God experienced. So the attribute of experience does not apply to God. God simply knows. Experience is out of that realm altogether, because to experience, you require a subject and an object. So I'm just throwing that to make things clearer.
Thank you. Yes. Ruxandra?
Yes, for my understanding, the consciousness is for the ego because needs the relation subject object, so need the separation. So this is what and the conscious is here because if you are present, you are conscious about this. So the consciousness is the quality of the present in the subject object relationship. And about God, they call it that is aware of itself. It's not an object outside of him to be aware. He is aware of itself. And we can't know God because to know something, it means to be outside and to observe it. And we're not outside of God. We are inside of God. So God can't be acknowledged by us. So more it's the ego mind who want to know and who make the seeking without finish because we need to know, but God is a mystery. It's not possible to be known. And how Ardit says, the only possible be close of it is only about experience. On subject object they collapse and remain only the experience of it. But even in God the experience doesn't exist because in God is no intention, it's no activity, it is God in itself. It's not a need for nothing. So well, for me it's a mystery.
Okay, wonderful. So this, I think, is an opportunity for us to go deeper into some of these lessons because as I think, Yuan, you mentioned earlier, and we all know forgiveness is looked at very differently in the course versus how we would normally use it in our common parlance, like you said. So I think this does bring us back to what forgiveness truly is. Forgiveness offers everything I want. Why is that? And Ruxandra, is your hand up from before? Okay, Peter, please go for it.
Well, I was actually going to go with the first one. Forgiveness is the key to happiness. So when I did this review last week, it was like, or maybe when I did the lesson a few weeks ago, or like 2 weeks ago, it's a very practical thing. And that is that if I'm holding a grievance, I'm unhappy. The only way I can experience happiness is to let go of the grievance. They're mutually exclusive. I can't hold grievances and also experience happiness. And it was like when I realized that, that's why forgiveness is the key to happiness. It's not even some airy-fairy mystical moral thing. It's just they can't occupy, it's like oil and water. They can't occupy the same space. So until I'm willing to let go of that grievance or those grievances, I am not able to experience what I perceive as happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Like Ardit said, make it simpler or keep it simple. I think that's where we just got to. Other responses to these two lessons. First one, Ardit, 121, forgiveness is the key to happiness. 122, forgiveness offers everything I want. And silence is perfectly golden, always. Let's move to the next two lessons, and I will also share them briefly. I thank my Father for his gifts to me. That's 123. And the next one, let me remember I am one with God. To me, I'll just say a few things. It's quite amazing how the Course uses duality and language, which are symbols twice removed from truth, to get to truth. right? Like in in the world of Zen, so to speak, we are pointed to the truth, but they caution us not to look at the finger that's pointing to the moon, but to look at the moon itself. So when I think, I'll give you my reaction to these two lessons. I thank my father for his gifts to me. So the way I look at it is his gifts, first of all, his gift is himself and his gift is me. And we are talking about the same thing. So when I'm thankful, it's what Peter said. When I'm not in grievance, I'm happy because that's my nature. When I'm thankful, I am one with my Father who created me as himself. And then the next one is the same thing. Let me remember I'm one with God. I'll just leave it at that.
Keep thinking about the clarification of terms. I overlooked it so long, but it's so precise, really. There's so much in there. The entire, what we're talking about here can be read there easily and meditated on. I think for me, on these particular two things that you just brought up here, I thank my Father for his gifts and let me remember I'm one with God. When I think of that, I think of how important gratitude is in setting up, first of all, an atmosphere for openness and willingness to receive of the Spirit whatever is coming to us to give us clarity. And if we remember, I guess, with the clarification of terms, as it says in the very beginning, this is not a course in philosophical speculation, nor is it concerned with precise terminology. And it tells us it's concerned only with atonement or the correction of perception. So I guess I'm separating these things. I'm getting off. I don't want to get off the course there, but gratitude seems to me to set up an attitude that means we're really, really open to understanding every single one of these lessons. And I think that's, for me, that's one place where it really kicks in. And other things start to become clearer when I do give that thanks. I realize ultimately that the thanks I'm giving is really with my heart, and it's silent, and it's within God. But it's an important step I take, and it has helped greatly in understanding.
Thank you, Ardith. Juan?
Okay, get my hand down here. Okay, there you go. Lesson 123, I thank my Father for his gifts to me. His gifts appear here in plural, so they're gifts. And at this level of worldly appearance, I think I'm trying to, I think that his gifts are each other. I think that his gifts to me are our brother, are every single one of you, and every single one of the 7.9 billion people alive in this planet. And who knows about the ones that are dead or the ones in the future. I think it's everybody. So that's, but to make it, keep it practical and simple, like Ardith suggests, let's only talk about 7.9 billion. But I think that's what, that's how I am processing those gifts. But then in lesson 124, he says, let me remember I am one with God. And in those lessons, there is usually a link from one to another. And what I'm reminded of here is that I'm not those 7.9 billion people. I'm one, and I'm one with God. And somehow those two lessons are connected that way. So that's my reflection on that.
I can't hear you, Manu.
Sorry, yes, please go ahead, Johanna. I was
Oh.
speaking, but it's not necessary to repeat.
Oh, okay. For my reflections on that statement, I link it back to the overarching statement from the review, that my mind holds only what I think with God. I think that's what the gifts are, the thoughts of God. And it helps me to distinguish between the thoughts of God, I call those inspirations, and the thoughts of the ego mind, they can be called God, their thoughts. So I am grateful for inspirations. And that's something I can subscribe to. It's very practical. When I get an inspiration, I know it immediately. Oh, this is an inspiration. I feel inspired by a thought or by an intuition. And it's sort of like the opening to the atonement, to the holy instant. And so to me, it means I'm grateful for the gifts, I'm grateful for the holy instants. So I sort of knit them all together, all these statements that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Totally makes sense. Okay, let's take this opportunity to move to the next set of lessons here. Which is right here. I couldn't find the document. 125. Well, before I repeat lesson 125, I think it bears to repeat the central theme. Johanna, thanks for bringing it up again. My mind holds only what I think with God. So this also goes back to the fact that the course has been given to us as a course in mind training.
Mhm.
And mind and thought are eternally creative. So whatever we do think in this illusory sense, which are not actual thoughts in the mind of God, but nevertheless they appear to have some effect. And so by making my mind, the course says before we can experience atonement, purification is required. And so this is our journey in purification, which is, forgiveness, and then holding our mind to only what God thinks. So lesson 125, in quiet, I receive God's word today. One might even say, in quiet, I receive God's word now. All that I give is given to myself. It's just so mind-boggling and beautiful. Peter, please go ahead.
Just on the second one, all that I give is given to myself. I'm reminded of, again, I don't remember exactly where it is, but he says, to have, give all to all. And, again, that's difficult for me to get my mind around from an ego standpoint, but conceptually, I get it, and it's this idea that, all that I give to myself. If there's only one of us, then obviously if I'm giving to myself. And to have, give all to all. And just, I studied the course with another group by telephone, and the facilitator of that group last week was saying, just try to live this week where you just give. It's only about giving, because the ego is preoccupied with what am I going to get back? What am I going to get? And again, somewhere in the course, he says the only lack, the belief in separation from God is the only lack that I need heal. And it's, you know, when I give in order to get back, I must be coming from a place of lack. It must be the subconscious program that there's not enough, or that I don't have enough, or I'm not going to receive. And so, you know, thought, you know, course in mind training, thought reversal. I mean, I can't think of a more profound thought reversal than to have give all to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah, basically, any egoic thought, which is most of our thoughts, right, on a daily basis when we are not paying attention, that's always a selfish thought. It's about, you know, where do I need to go next? What do I need to say? How will my body be healthy? And so, like you said, Peter, it's all about receiving. And by its very definition, the assumption is that I am separate and therefore lacking. My mind holds only what I think with God, takes us to that place of beingness, that self-reflective quality of I amness, which allows us to dismiss duality, even if for a moment.
Mhm.
Lesson 127 in the review. Ardith, this one goes to what you were mentioning before. There is no love but God's. And 128 says, the world I see holds nothing that I want. There is no love but God's. Let's talk about that. Let's discuss that a little bit. And I think 128 can also take some discussion after that. Johanna?
Well, that's a statement that runs contrary to everything the world makes us believe, right? In movies and in books and romances and whatnot. Even parental love doesn't qualify. And so what does that leave us with?
Could that be all inclusive? I'm just asking a question.
Go ahead, Ardith.
If there, I know I was just going to say, answering you directly, Johanna, or not answering, asking another question. If it says there is no love but God's, and we assume that God is love, then there's nothing else but love, so that any type of love that we might separate out is really not separate. It's all of it is love. As God, we can't express or feel the enormity of it or the complexity of it, or the until we are actually in that state of awareness that we get to when we get all the blocks removed. But that in the meanwhile, even in this illusion, anything that's expressed in a loving way, even in a minimalist sense, is love, is God. I mean, I don't know. It's just another way to helps me to feel that way, because then I separate less. Because one last thing I just thought of as a symbol to me is that in English we use the word love to describe every kind of love we can possibly imagine in the illusion, and yet many other languages, and you would know and be able to attest to this, Johanna, and others who speak several languages, that in other languages there are different words to describe different types of love. But it's all, to me anyway, and it's becoming more and more apparent for myself, that there is no love but God's, and that's it. That's really it. Period. For me.
Yeah, interesting that you would put it. That's, you know, you sort of look at it from a different angle. It's like any type of love, it can't be but God's love. And I was looking at it from another angle, saying like, if it's not inclusive, if it's not universal, it doesn't qualify. And
Hmm.
then, of
Maybe-
course, you separate it off. And I like what you were saying.
Maybe
'Cause
they're
God-
actually
God
the
is-
same thing, kind of like bat and mirrors, actually.
Yeah, yeah. But you
Yeah.
know, if the course says God is in everything I see,
Hmm.
then of course any type of love expressed
Yeah.
is God. It's just how do you look at it? Do you look at it with the
Ah.
ego mind, or with the parent mind, or with the lover's mind, or with the whatever mind, or do you look at it with the God's mind? So
I love
that's
that
really
you said
helpful.
that. I love that you said that. Which mind are you looking at it with? That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that brings our two perspectives together.
Yep.
And I would just underscore it by saying, which mind are you? Sharon, please go next. And you're muted right now.
I was just wondering, is the phrase, my mind holds only what I think with God, is that kind of wishful thinking? That I want my mind to hold only what I think with God? Because I don't know that I'm there 24/7, that I'm thinking with God. So is it, what about that statement? Yeah, Johanna, what do you?
Well, one of us actually addressed this at the beginning, I think. And when they said, my mind holds only what I think with God, the mind is blank. The original condition of the mind is blankness. At least that's
I
how
know.
I understood it.
Yeah, but it also says that we could listen. Ooh, that's in my neighborhood. I'm going to mute myself.
I
Oh,
want to
okay.
hear what you have to say.
Yeah, maybe when it stops running.
Yeah, it seemed a lot closer, Sharon. So, okay.
It's not your kitchen, Sharon.
Yeah, just make sure it's not your own. Okay. Okay. And so when Johanna, when Ardith was mentioning lessons 8 and 10, she was the one who brought up my mind is blank. And in that sharing, I think the perspective that I received was that the blankness of the mind was referring to the illusory mind,
Yes,
not
yes.
not necessarily what you
Really?
would be. Yeah.
But isn't the mind in its ideal state transparent, totally empty,
Yeah.
totally receptive?
What's really interesting, Johanna, is that's exactly how I interpreted it when Ardith was sharing it. But then as she continued to read, it seemed, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I think it's just a different way of looking at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also an element of, I just now noticed too, in reading it this way, my mind, yeah, you're right, the illusion mind for sure, holds only what I think with God. In other words, if we have a blank mind otherwise, if it's not God thoughts, not loving thoughts, they're not going to stay. The only thing that remains, that word holds, is really sticking out at me. The only thing that stays is that love of God and how we think in that way. Going back to Johanna's pointing out which mind are we thinking with. We're thinking with the spirit mind, the Christ mind, it's going to be loving and it's going to stay. These are all words, of course, symbols of symbols.
They're keepers.
So it's so hard to to speak it, but that helps me because then if I'm more conscious. I'm trapped by every single word I speak. So I think that's okay. I got enough out there. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's still it's in the course is dealing with the dualistic reality that we are in. And so, this other teacher of non-duality, Rupert Spira, he once said that A Course in Miracle goes from the perspective of, because he teaches a different mode. It says, but the course goes from the mode of the ego. It first reminds us that we are the ego, and then from there it leads us to non-duality, if you want to call it that. And so, Sharon, I think, in my opinion, in my interpretation, my mind holds only what I think with God is both. It's an idealistic state, as well as it's the journey that leads us to that state, if you want to call it that. So it's definitely an affirmation as well, while it's describing the completion. One.
Yeah, let me get my hand down here. What comes to mind, Sharon, about the mind thing, and my mind holds only what I think with God, is that if God were not think of us, we would not exist, period. And if we were not sharing God's thoughts and exchanging them, we would simply do not exist, period. So the fact that I hold only the thing, what my mind holds only what I think of with God, it's a statement of fact. It has to be that way. But in the illusion business in which we find ourselves, we can think of that, we can say no to the thoughts of God, but that's the illusion. So somehow there are all these levels. At the level of illusion, we think that we need to be reminded that my mind holds only what I think with God, because that's a fact. I would not be able to exist otherwise. So I don't know if that helps or make things more complicated, but there are different levels in which we can speak about these things. That's it.
So in a few minutes, we'll be at the top of this hour. And if one of you can please, at that time, lead us to a closing prayer, so that this is just a quick note to you who's going to share that prayer with us. I'd like to bring up one last, so in lesson 146, which is referencing lessons 131 and 132, 131 goes like this, and I'm not sharing it, I'm just sharing the words. No one can fail who seeks to reach the truth. Any last thoughts on this amazing lesson, which they all are, of course? No one can fail who seeks to reach the truth.
Very good to know.
I guess it basically goes back to the fact that we never left on,
Yes.
on this journey to nowhere.
Right.
Yeah, when you think of it, that what that says, the journey without distance to the goal, it's never changed. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Which is cause for, like, Ardith Johanna was going with her arms up and down in celebration when we were, and which, yeah, so it just reminds us that we have no reason to not be joyous and happy.
Exactly.
Yep.
And in that joy and happiness and in that gratitude, we are home. And Peter, by doing that, we are giving and therefore receiving just that.
Beautifully
Sometimes,
summed up.
as a note on that, sometimes when I do my meditation, I consciously smile for the duration, even though there's nobody else in the room and my eyes are closed. I try to remember that when I do my meditation is to smile, and it can be very profound. I don't always remember to do it, but when I do, it's like it's like, oh, so now I am as God created me, because God created me in joy. And so in that moment, I'm experiencing joy. And they say that, even if you don't feel like you're happy, if you smile, your mind follows a physiology and you can feel lighter.
Yeah.
And I tell people too, sometimes, how do you meditate? I say, just smile for 20 minutes and see how your life changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
For no apparent reason, just smile.
That's beautiful.
I've heard that if you are upset about something, a really good thing to do is look up and smile, and it absolutely changes, like the physiology changes your mental attitude somehow. Look up and
That's true. That's really true. Okay, so who's going to speak up and close this meeting with a prayer?
I vote Johanna.
Oh, that's perfect, because at the same time she was raising her right arm.
Oh yes, good. Good.
I go back to my favorite prayer, which is the text of the lessons 361 through 365. They have a way of speaking to me directly to my heart. So I'm sharing now. And after the prayer, we'll have a couple minutes of silence, and then I'll stop the recording. And we can stay on for debriefing if you want to. He goes. This holy instant would I give to you. Be you in charge, for I would follow you, certain that your direction gives me peace. And if I need a word to help me, he will give it to me. If I need a thought, that will he also give. And if I need but stillness and a tranquil open mind, these are the gifts I will receive of him. He is in charge by my request, and he will hear and answer me, because he speaks for God my Father and his Holy Son. Amen.